friends in the room, not seen for some time. Okay, Dr. Magumeta, the Stephen Chigolo, and I won't mention everybody's name, but these are the old colleagues we used to collect frogs with. So, okay, so welcome. My name is actually Jalhanga, the ED of Nature Uganda. I will moderate this discussion, and I will be shortly introducing the other people who will be participating or contributing to this discussion. It's a very interesting discussion, a little bit different from what we have those who have attended public talks before. So this is let's just testing this. Yeah. Otherwise, are you not listening? Listening what? Oh, you have people online. Okay, all right. Okay. About 25 or 26 years ago, I used to attend lectures in this theater, and we didn't have microphones, so lecturers used to shout. I could hear. So, but we have some people online, so I have to be fair to them. So I was saying that this is a slightly different public talk like I'm having. Those who have attended those before, this is a little bit more scientific, and that's why we thought we should come at the university. But at the same time, our base venue for public talks, which is the National Museum Hall, is under renovation now. So we don't have access to it until when it is completed. So for now, we are going to be rotating this discussion. So today we are in Makerere University. Probably the next one we are going to be in Chambogo, and next one in a different place until when our base has been fully restored, and then we can get back to a neutral and central venue. Okay. I can have that, Jen, please. So I guess we have all seen the flyer, which is on screen. We have for about 3 hours, here. Registration and arrival is going on. I will give a few remarks about Nature Uganda. Nature Uganda is a civil society organization. Some other people call it not-for-profit, or in Uganda, commonly referred to us as non-government organization. So a non-government organization. Go to the next slide. So Nature Uganda is a brand. Our organization was started in 1909 as East Africa Natural Resource Society. It is actually the oldest conservation organization in East African region. It was started by then, whom we call colonials, and the purpose of the organization was to document the diversity of wildlife in East Africa. The professors here, the old books, the old checklists, the old ecology books, they were all published by East Africa Natural Resource Society, and it gave rise to the biggest library we have in East Africa, in Nairobi, at the National Museums of Kenya, and the collections that these scientists used to put together were all deposited in Nairobi, that now we know at the National Museums of Kenya. So that's where all collections were put. In fact, we branded in 1998 as Nature Uganda, but we did brand for all the membership organizations that are affiliated with East African Natural Society in the different countries. So here we've got Nature Uganda, in Kenya we've got Nature Kenya, in Tanzania we've got Nature Tanzania. Okay? The other East African countries, as we know them today, are new, so we are hoping maybe we shall reach there as well. Okay, but as Nature Uganda, we have got our mission, which is promoting understanding, appreciation, and conservation of nature. But every 5 years, we have got a strategic plan that is focused on a particular issue. And the one we have for 2023-2028 is looking at biodiversity conservation and sustainable natural resources management. We work with the other groups, both nationally and internationally. At global level, we're members of IUCN and partners of BirdLife International. But we have got other collaborations and partnerships at national and local level where we're from. So where that map, what that map shows, where you see that logo, the bird is called the long-crested eagle. It has a different story about why it became our logo, but where you can see it on the map is where Nature Uganda has got activities. Okay, so from down from Solo to Kidepo to Mount Kenya, West Nile to Pianope and Mbale, Victoria. So wherever you see the logo is where Nature Uganda has activity. Next. And our work focuses on 4 important pillars. One, we look at species. I use that one because we're going to be talking about many of them today. We look at sites like important bird areas, or Ramsar sites, or protected area systems, and things like that. We look at habitats. Nature Uganda is arguably the most active civil society organization working on wetlands, for example. And then we do all of this together and for the benefit of people. Okay, next. Okay, that is our strategic plan now. We've got 4 strategic objectives: knowledge base, to document, to do research; conservation, that is, we fold our sleeves, go down and look at how we can stop threats to our sites and species; sustainable use of natural resources; and then building capacity of the organization to be able to do all that work. Next. Now, the reason that we organize this public talk today is because partly this graph that you see here, the assessment of forests in Uganda in 2016 consistent decline of forestry in Uganda since 1990, and I think you students should be probably aware of that. And because 95% of the population in Uganda depend on biomass, and I think sometimes I should say it is 100%. I think everybody in Uganda, I'm sure even if you went to State House and find a bag of charcoal or something like that. So we all use biomass, charcoal, firewood. So 45 million people using firewood as a source of energy is many millions of tons, and that is all 40 million tons of firewood, 1 million tons of charcoal every year. So how much would we need to sustain this kind of consumption? Very, very high. So, and when the minister was making a presentation to Parliament, she indicated that if we don't tame this, probably in the next 20 to 30 years, we may not have any forest standing in Uganda. Probably that was an extreme statement, but already now, we don't have probably any forest estate outside the protected ones. So we are getting there. So we may, by 2030, have more forests. I'm sure Dr. Kite, you may start teaching forestry in the books rather than having the forest. And it is not only the forest. We look at the wetlands. Next. The wetlands are doing exactly the same. From 1994 to now, we have lost about 1.5 million hectares of wetlands. This is just about 20 or so years. This is in our lifetime. So we could easily lose wetlands as well in a very, very short time. And again, similarly, these are figures from government. These are not worked out. These are figures from government. Okay, next. Interestingly, this is the recent report that indicated that Uganda is one of the biggest deposits of peat. You know peat? These are plant materials deposited in the ground over a long time. Okay? And peat is a big store of carbon. So much of our emission, if you see the emissions of Uganda for carbon, much of our emissions are not because of factories. It's not because of even firewood. The biggest emission for Uganda is degradation of wetlands, exposing the peat and letting the carbon. So if you are talking about conservation of wetlands, it's no longer about species, about livelihoods. Now you're talking about global impact in the planet. Next. We do research, and I encourage you, please get in touch, those who plan to get involved, so that this research can inform policy decisions. Next. This information, for example, it resulted in identification of 12 Ramsar sites. These are wetlands of international importance, recognized at the global level. There are 2 in yellow that were just proposed. They are approved, but yet not yet gazetted. We are hoping in a couple of months we should have Lake Biveni and the Chianja wetland in Gwendo as Ramsar sites, and new Ramsar sites. Next. So the database is there. We've got the data. We've got probably 250,000 records of birds. That's the biggest that you can have, that you have in the country. By end of next year, we shall have over 50,000 from reptiles. They're going to be the biggest database. And this information is free. Please, if you want to use it, come to Nature Uganda and you make use of this information. Yes. That's the same. We're showing how it's constructed. And in this information, the analysis gives us some extremely worrying situation. This is our national symbol, the gray-brown crane. Yeah, some people call it a crested crane. About 1970 or 70s, when the first records were made, we had about 100,000 birds. 100,000 birds. And I think for us who grew up from the villages, you could hear them every morning, everywhere in Uganda. As we speak now, they are about 10,000, probably less. So in our lifetime, we have lost more than 85% of the species. And it is the national symbol. This is the bird that we should all be looking at. We should all, in fact, when I was young, they would say if you kill a crane, they put you in prison. I've never seen anybody in prison. Nobody has killed him. But at least we are killing the habitat where this bird survives. Next. Okay, so finally, I think this is a final slide on this, my introduction. Wetlands in 1930s and 1940s, again, you are scholars, so should go and look at that, when national parks were being established and forest reserves were being established. Wetlands at that time were looked at as wastelands. They were looked at as habitats that were not important. So if you look at our forest reserves, look at our national parks today, they don't contain wetlands. Even when you find a lake or a wetland inside a national park, it is gazetted out as not part of the national park. So has anybody gone to Lake Ngoro? Has anybody gone there? Yes, Lake Ngoro is not part of the Lake Ngoro National Park, although it is completely surrounded by the what? By the national park. That was the design at that time. But when we have now studied these wetlands and known them, they are extremely important, containing over 25% of biodiversity of Uganda. So we have lost a lot, but we have not lost all of it, so we still have a chance. And the reason I put this slide is now to work on wetlands conservation, you need to work with communities, to work with people, because these wetlands are outside the protected area, and therefore you have to work with people, their land, in order to protect these wetlands. There is a gazetteer now that is now gazetting all wetlands as protected areas, but we need to wait for that and see how. Okay, so that is Nature Uganda. That's what we do in brief. You're welcome to this public talk. Public talks are there every first Thursday of the month. Yeah, when we were still at the museum, I would tell people that don't even ask whether there is a public talk or not. The first Thursday of the month, just walk to the museum, we've had public talk. But now we are going to be informing you because now we are going to be rotating around until the museum is sorted out. Okay, so I will stop there for now, unless if somebody has a big question. But at Nature Uganda, we have got what we call working groups, technical working groups. So we've got 6 working groups on mammals, on plants, on insects, on herps. What are the other ones? Microbial sources, the small things, and what's the other one? Plants and plants, exactly. So you can join any one of those working groups if you want to improve your knowledge of these issues. So he's the convener or the head of that working group, and arguably the person who has been most active in research on reptiles and amphibians. So I'm going to invite him to give you some just brief remarks, and then invite our guest speaker to give us the main presentation. Perfect.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, my EP Achilles, Uganda. I've had about Matthias de Hangana, and I was being bacteria since 1980. Dr. Architect and others who know me, I used to do content lecturing for many years since 1996 here, and many other things. Until I joined Nature Uganda because of a project funded by JRF, which funds students in herpetology. But before that, I've been a convener of one of the working groups called Herps Working Group, which are amphibians and reptiles. Basically, we encourage people interested in amphibians and reptiles to know about taxonomy matters, the species you're talking about. And then we go ahead to carry out research. We have trained several herpetologists, but most of them are taken by other people. A few in mind is Wilbur Lupago, Environment Officer Roads now. Paulo Aguti, Environment Officer Commissioner in the day, and several others. So when we're doing perhaps people like amphibians and reptiles, I remember Dr. Pansil making fun of me when I was receiving my doctorate. And they were like, Conrad from speaking my citation. He will talk about amphibians. But many people are going and learning many things because this ecology principles are the same. In the project right now funded by IUCN, we are training a cohort of herpetologists in Uganda from 6 universities. One student cantonal stand-up. That's one of the students funded by JRS through Nature Uganda, and she's going to get her master's in a report. So we don't want you to wait and hang around. You get funding, use it, and go out in the field and do other work. We have others in Barre University, Muskema University, Moni University, IIU, and Guru University. Thanks for the funding from JRS through Nature Uganda that we are building that capacity. The expertise is collecting lots of data. The little information most of the taxa, the old taxa, plants, mammals, birds, everybody was going out there. Dodos, I will tell you, recruiting a few. Of course, we had entomologists largely focusing on agriculture and forestry entomology. But there are lots of groups outside the forestry. And you only see the use function of these species when you learn about it. It's not only about pests and parasites or destroyer groups. No, they have still functions. So the working groups are to encourage such groups to grow up. So in the project I'm handling and through Nature Uganda, we are trying to build the threshold so that for research and other purposes, different universities, more people know about at least amphibians and reptiles. And eventually we hope to get lots of data that should be able to map on our areas to know who is found where. You may see the crescent crane or leopard as important species, but some of these others may be important in several other things. Suppose in the future medicinal animal. Several functions come from different species. The numbers, once we have enough data, we hope we can use it for several purposes. And managers can use it in conservation, can apply it for conservation purposes. And we hope we should be able to identify what we call key amphibian areas. We have bird areas, we have key plant areas. We hope we can have key amphibian areas and then merge all those layers and areas and find out what is the most key habitat for different taxa that needs to be seized down for proper management. So that's what I do at Nature Uganda. Second year, I have 1 more year as we look for more projects. Another work I did when I joined the herpetological world, my colleague, Professor Luca Lucelli, cited me when I was in BirdLife Nairobi, and since 2009, we've been corresponding. And recently, he identified a species called Cyclanovis elegans, the most critically endangered turtle, freshwater turtle in the world, which should have been in the whole of Africa, but has disappeared and is only now found in Sudan, South, and Uganda. So we carried out recently a feasibility study for Uganda, and we found the species is somewhere there, I don't remember the names, and it needs some conservation efforts. That will be another topic to talk about. But with that introduction to look at, let me now introduce you to our keynote speaker today, Professor Luca Lucelli. Who is this gentleman in the in our midst? He's a renowned tropical ecologist and conservation biologist. He's a passionate explorer of natural communities within rainforests and wetlands for West Africa, particularly Nigeria. He was there since he was 15. Nigeria, Togo, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Burkina Faso, and recently, 24 years ago, he joined us in East Africa, started with Southern Sudan, but when we saw the turtle, a critically endangered turtle in Uganda, he called me and was like, let's do a feasibility study. So he's here now, and we hope to have him here for a long time. He has over 200 peer-reviewed papers, several of them in top journals for those who are extras and those who are upcoming scientists. When you have a peer-reviewed article in a good journal, people will know about it. He has several of them. 200 is just to mention a few, but some of the key journals we can talk about is Nature. a journal called Ecology, Oikos, and Biology Letters. He's a herpetofauna expert on with a focus on snakes, tortoises, and turtles. When I talk about amphibians, oh, that's not my word. But when we talk about turtles, oh, that's his focal area. For your purpose, for your information, the boss, I would say, is the president of Turtles of Africa, and the vice chair of Turtles and Tortoises of the World in the IUCN Species Survival Commission. So you don't talk about those two. For Africa, he is the last to consult. In the world, he's the second. He recently came from Vietnam with a lot of sugar problem because in Vietnam they take sugar instead of salt. That one you didn't know, and didn't know either. He holds a full professorship in ecology for Italian Public University Network. He is also holds professorship in statistics and population ecology in University de Rome, Tokyo. He is the chief executive officer at Institute for Development, Ecology, Conservation and Cooperation, IECC, at River State University of Science and Technology, Nigeria. And he is the chief editor of the African Journal of Ecology. If you read AGE, he is now the chief editor. In the old times in Uganda, we had Professor Kaende for many years. For the chief editor, now he's the chief editor. And not only that, he loves himself, also very handsome. He's a visiting professor to Nature Uganda and our keynote presenter today, keynote speaker for the topic is going to discuss. Professor Luca Luiselli, you are welcome to the podium.
Well, I want to say thank you very much for this wonderful introduction, and just a little introduction about what we are talking about today. I will try to make a conference that is not too much scientific, because I know that science is wonderful for scientists and is extremely boring for people that is not scientists. So I will try to explain with easy words what we are doing and what needs to be done. I would say that in part the speech will overlap a little bit with what Ashley has just presented. So I will speak also of Uganda. This presentation will be based on data collected in Nigeria and in other parts of Africa, to let you know how the problem that are typical in Uganda are in fact typical of the whole African continent, and I would say of most of the tropical regions through the world. So, what we can say? Let's introduce a little bit what deforestation means at the global level. At the global level, we have that 420 million hectares approximately of forest, pure forest, have been destroyed since 1990. For the history of the world, 1990 is yesterday. For many of you that are young, it's a lifetime. But for many of us that are not young, it's a small portion of the life. And for the world, it's really yesterday. So, this is a huge amount of forest lost in the world. And just in the last in 5 years, between 2015 and 2020, the annual rate of deforestation was estimated at 10 million hectares per year. You know what is 1 hectare? Imagine 10 million hectares. For wait. For wetlands, the situation is even more catastrophic because since 1970, 35% of the wetlands through the world have been destroyed, which means that in 50 years approximately we have lost more than 1/3 of the wetlands all through the world. This is especially due to agriculture, that is by far the most important reason of wetland devastation. But whatever is the reason, the fact is that just 50 years were enough for destroying 1/3 of the wetlands of the world. So it's a speed of devastation which is even higher than forest. And of course, everybody knows what is the ecosystem services that forest and wetland do guarantee to the world. And so you can see how human beings are literally killing their future, and they are pushing our world into a catastrophic situation. Okay, this should be clearly understood. We always speak about big disease, big epidemics, events like has been the COVID-19, Ebola, HIV, that are obviously a threat to the humankind, but consider that we are devastating the environment so much that very soon we won't have the natural resources enough to guarantee a survival for lots of human beings. And that all of this is even accelerated by the climate change, the global change. Let's see what is the situation across Africa, because those figures were about the world. But I have studied the situation in Africa very specifically, because I did a research published in that paper, Africa's Biodiversity in Between Ecology and Economy, which tries to understand the potential of development of Africa through ecological research, through ecological conservation, rather than just through typical human development things like industries and so on. And in order to do this, I selected randomly 37 African nations. And I calculated how much forest they have lost, each of the single countries, since the year 2000, based on data that are available from Global Forest Watch, which use satellite remote sensing analysis. Well, I calculated that the average forest loss in each country is 0.61 per year between 2001 and 2022. If you look at this number, 0.61%, the typical person that doesn't use the brain says, oh, what is it? 0.6 is nothing. But if we calculate how much this means in year after year, we will see that in 21 years, 13% of the forest of Africa have disappeared. 13%. Which means that if we continue with this rate, in theory, after 20 years, we will have lost all the African forest. This means having little by little, every single year, our forest to be destroyed for development initiatives. Okay? Like in Africa, there are mountains where it is more difficult to operate deforestation. But in any case, the The problem is that Africa is a huge continent. And if the great majority of the continent lost forest, the average temperature will be higher. And in Africa it is already very high. The desertification will be extreme. And in Africa it is already very serious. The food production will be lower. And in Africa this is a problem. So deforestation means to increase exponentially the poverty of African societies. So it is a real serious emergency for Africa. So the more is the in each year, in each country, the more the deforestation impacts the country, the least is the average amount of richness that the single African citizen has. In other words, benefit from deforestation. Nobody will do it. For sure, it will be the big companies, big oil companies, big cement companies. For sure, some super rich Nigerian businessmen will benefit. But the great majority of the people will have only increased their economic problems. So to save forests and wetlands should be an important topic for each of you, because it will end the life of you and sure of the sons, of your grandsons, and so on. So it's a legacy that we have to have in Africa. And this is demonstrated by data. They are published. What about Uganda? We have gone from the world to the continent. Now let's see Uganda. Part of the data that I will present are the same that Ashles presented. But just to remind you, because people say repetita iuva, which means if you say the same thing all the times, it's better than just one time. So let's see that in 2012 decade, Uganda had 6.9 billions of hectares of natural forest, which extended for approximately 1/3 of the country. Now, in 2023, it has lost 68 points. The wetland coverage in Uganda is reduced from 15.5% in 1994 to 13% in 2017. So again, the wetland degradation has been extremely fast in this country. In other words, Uganda has lost 42.4% of its wetlands in the last 20 years, which is, I even put the exact amount of lost wetlands, but anyway, the big message here is that Uganda is not better than the rest of the Africa. Is same thing. We are losing, you people are losing forests and wetlands so fastly. And your annual GDP will be impacted, and is already impacted by this kind of problem. Okay? And this is important. But you have to consider it from the ecological, from the economical point of view. Another crucial point. Not all countries are the same. So, for instance, let's make a simple comparison. Nigeria is a country in which, again, there has been a huge devastation of the forest, and in which there has been a huge devastation of the wetlands. But Nigeria, the Nigeria's economy, don't rely on forest and food coming from the forest and from the natural situation, but from the oil. Nigeria is the 6th oil producer in the world. Nigeria is the 3rd cocoa producer in the world. So they have other types of incomes that make Nigeria a superpower in Africa. Okay, so the impact of deforestation and wetland degradation is big, but it will affect not this big, not a so high percentage of people, as this happens in Uganda, because in Uganda, as one of the most important business is ecotourism. Lot of people come in Uganda to visit the forest, to visit the national parks, to appreciate the Ugandan resources. So, the ecological resources are crucial for the Uganda economy. They are not crucial for the Nigerian economy. So, the fact that Nigeria actually lost less forest and less wetlands here than Uganda is extremely serious for a country like Uganda that is much more dependent on these resources than how Nigeria is. So for Ugandans it's more important to conserve forests and wetlands than for Nigeria. More important than for Ivory Coast, that has cocoa as the biggest export and is a superpower for cocoa industry. It's more important than for South Africa. Probably in the whole of Africa, I think that is the country for which it is most important to have good conservation, because I think that is the country that proportion gets the most income from activities related to natural resources and ecosystem resilience. This graphic shows exactly what I'm telling you. You see that the red line is the growth in GDP in percentage, in annual percentage, put on against the years, and you will see that there is a correlation. You have to forget about the years 2019 to 2021 because simply there was the COVID-19 epidemics, and so simply there was no drought, there was collapse in GDP growth because there were no activities. But anyway, this is the slide that summarizes what I told you just now. So this is the situation. But here we have the scope of this public lecture is to analyze shortly and clearly what are the effects of deforestation on biodiversity. Okay, because everybody can tell I cut a tree and then the animal that live on the tree will die. Okay, that's obvious. But the point of any scientific research is to quantify. So we cannot tell we are worried for the animal of the forest because the forest is being cut. No, we have to demonstrate which effects the deforestation has on the biodiversity in general and specifically for understanding better what we can do to protect those forest areas in the biodiversity. Despite deforestation has been a very big issue since decades in Africa, and as well regional destruction, there are few studies that have systematically and quantifically carried out so far for analyzing quantitatively how fast is the disappearance of species, which proportion of species can disappear, and so on. I have led a team in Nigeria for more than 20 years that was funded by some of the largest oil companies in the world, that funded us for analyzing the direct effects of the forest loss on reptile communities in the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta is the biggest oil producing area of Africa and oil and gas producing area of Africa, and one of the third biggest in the world. Is a huge there is a huge oil production in a relatively small area, characterized by swamp forest, wetlands, huge formations of mangrove forest, and other rainforest patches that have been so much devastated since when the oil was discovered that now they occur as just patches, just forest patches. Just to let you understand how important is the Niger Delta for the world, is that in 1960, 1st October 1960, Nigeria got the independence after decades of criminal colonization by the British Empire. In 1961, the oil was discovered. Okay, so they got the independence just before the oil was discovered, and it was clearly discovered that it was the largest, the biggest areas for oil industries in the whole of Africa. Since then, Shell company, pushed the people, some organizations in the Niger Delta, at the time called Biafra, to make a terrible civil war because because they understood very clearly there was, even if it cannot be said openly, clearly there was the British government behind, because they understood that a huge richness was disappeared from their own hands, and so they wanted to control again the situation through the Popusan tribes living in the Niger Delta. So they pushed, there are a lot of historical documents that demonstrate this, so it's not speculation, it's true. They pushed the independence of the Biafra through a terrible civil war, claiming, of course, the usual rubbish that for democracy, for this kind of rubbish that they say, but in fact was for controlling the oil. But the Nigerian government, the federal government of Nigeria won the Biafra war, and so they couldn't control anymore the situation. But this is just to let you understand that this resource is so big that it produced a huge, terrible war. Okay? And since then, the situation has changed. Nigeria is a democratic country. Now it's possible to work there. That's for 30 years. That's not a problem for me. And we studied the communities of reptiles in the forest to understand what happens with forest loss using the typical agriculture system of Nigeria, which is typical of the whole of Africa, as an indication. The system that the use of agriculture is slash and burn agriculture. Slash and burn is used also in Uganda, it's used everywhere in Africa. Practically, the people bomb a given area so that they can cultivate, and this shifts from one area to another. So typically, after a given lapse of time, there are no more primary forests, but there are several patches of secondary forests that are different just in terms of time since the last time they were born, and a very few patches of mature forest. Okay, all these kind of habitats occur in the Niger Delta. So what we did, we selected 4 plots. One that was a mature forest plot protected, so that is not cut since 70, 80, 90 years at least. A forest plot that has been just born for agriculture. Another that is recovering after 12, 18 months after the fire and after the abandonment the so-called plantation. Indeed, a recovering plot after more than 3 years after the fire. In fact, the reality is more about 10 years from the last time that it was bought by people. So you can see what happens in a place where the forest is just working on, and below a typical Nigerian rainforest that is maybe 10 kilometers apart from the other place, just to make you understand that there are 2 different worlds in the same geographical area. These are our four study areas of Archi, Tonuscia, Govia, and Dora. As you can see, they are quite close, and they are all situated along this beautiful river, which is the Upper Orashi, the Orashi River, and they are in the peripheral part of the Upper Orashi Forest Reserve, which is the most important forest reserve in the nature delta. Is a really a paradise for biodiversity, but still at the border there are this kind of agricultural activities. So we wanted to understand what it happens in these areas. Okay? And you see in the small map that represents the extreme south of the country of Nigeria. And what we are seeing is extremely interesting. Now, these are foundation curves. I don't know if you know what does it mean. Basically, in this curve, you put the number of individual reptiles that you observe day by day in the field against the number of new species that you find in that place. Okay? So, for instance, if I touch 150 individuals, and I found only one species, it is very unlikely that there will be more than 2 species in the area. Because otherwise I would have already observed other species, 150 individuals. At the same time, if I sample 150 individuals and I find 13 species, this means that the richness of that place is much higher than the richness of the species, of the area with one species, because I am using the same number of individuals. Okay? So basically, in these lines, so for instance, in this case, if we have a curve like this, okay, with this kind of trajectory, it means that the sampling that we have done is sufficient to tell that we have sampled all the species of the area. Because you see, practically we have already reached an asymptote. So the more, even if you go with many more individuals captured, the number of individuals, then it is very unlikely that through here we have a new peak of new species. Because we have already observed the species inside this curve. If our sampling was not good, our sampling would have had a curve like this. Something more exponential than what is this. Okay? So basically what can we say is that in the 4 plots that I told you before, the number of individuals was enough to predict how many species do we have in each plot subject to a different treatment. Okay? So in this graphic, I compare what we found for different sites, and as you can see, for the same number of individuals, the curve concerning the mature forest has a much higher number of species, about 21 sympatric reptiles, than all the other curves. And if you compare this with this, the difference is huge. But this one is not the born forest. This one is the recovered forest after several years after the fire. And after several years after the fire, we see that the curve, yes, has increased, but not that much. After several years of treatment, of recovering, of forest recovery, we still have a species richness that is more similar to the devastated areas than the not devastated areas. So, in other words, what does it mean? This means that we can do whatever we want, but even after years and years and years of recovering, we cannot return at the original conditions. Mature forests are gone, and when they are gone, they are gone. This is a crucial message because there is nothing optimistic in this graph. This means we have no chance. If we destroy an habitat, that habitat will never recover, even if it will look better in our eyes. Okay? And this is another graphic that is interesting, but it's too complicated to explain. That just show you that the trajectory of the mature forest is totally another world compared to the trajectory of the probability of finding the various species in all the other treatments. So even this graph confirms that the devastated areas are more similar to the recovered areas than how they are to the pristine areas. Okay, so this is super important. Some groups completely disappear. For instance, the chelonians, the tortoises, these ones are concerned by fires and they will never so they go. In fact, they are one of the most threatened groups of vertebrates in the world. There is no way. They will not come back. Other species can recolonize the areas. But generally, the species that are slow moving or that feed based on ambush tactics, so that they stay in ambush and they wait for the prey to come, those ones don't recolonize or recolonize it very slowly. So chameleons recolonize, but very slowly. The large terrestrial vipers, like the gaboon viper, recolonize, but very slowly. Cobras recolonize quickly because they are wide foraging and they have large home ranges. So the extinction doesn't occur at all stages in all the species. But some groups of species with some specific ecologies are much more prone to extinction, to local extinction than other groups of species. This for reptiles for sure, it happens with all the other animal groups, that's for sure. What's the effects of devastation on wetlands in Uganda? For wetlands in Uganda is Matthias, that has been the pioneer of this kind of studies on amphibians and reptiles. And of course, I'm very happy to work with him and with his data about that. So I will just make a comparison that will be enough for you to understand that if we speak about wetlands, it's not much better than if we speak about forests. So we have compared his own data in an area with a wetland that is very altered against another area with wetlands that are in very good conditions. As example of wetlands in good conditions, we use the Lake Nabgaro. And we compare the good wetlands of the Lake Nabgaro with the very bad Lubigi wetland that is situated inside Kampala. So a natural area against a residual wetland devastated by the urban matrix. This look at how it's beautiful this landscape, look how it's not beautiful this landscape. And the wetland inside Kampala is shown in the map. As you see, it's just a strip completely surrounded by houses. We asked which one are the visible effects of the herpetofauna. And you have to compare that the two areas have been sampled by Matthias and his team in exactly the same way, using visual encounter surveys, pitfall plots, exactly the same standard system. So we cannot, exactly as Nigeria, we cannot explain the differences in terms of different type of research. No, it has been the same thing, done by the same people that collected this data in the same way, and so we are sure that what we observed is real. And we observed 24 species of amphibians. In which wetland we observed 16 species. So this means that 8 species of amphibians were lost. 8 species is a huge amount is a huge percentage of species if the maximum is 24. It means that 1/3 of the fauna disappears immediately. So this quantification is dramatic. Even because you are not to consider that each species is useless. No, each species has its own role in the ecosystem. So if we lost 8 species of frogs, we for sure we lost other species of small mammals, of birds, of insects, of arthropods. So the whole trophic chain of the environment. We lost about 1/3 of its complexity. And this is catastrophic. Okay, because it's now that we have lost 1/3. Maybe after 10 years, we will have lost another 5 of the 16 species. Even without doing nothing, even keeping the wetland as it is now. So if by chance the wetland now is start to be well preserved, yes, better than destroyed, but it is already very altered. And my example before shows you that it will never come back at the level in which it was before being completely devastated. So the final message for you is that the continued destruction of wetlands in Ghana is the real catastrophic phenomenon for the whole system, not just for the frogs or for the animals, and should be stopped now. And all of us, we have to work for stopping this degradation now with all the possible ways that we know, without waiting for others to do what we can do. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Prof, for such global, national, and global review of the devastation of our habitats and the impact on our. This is.
This is fun, that. You told me to go down.
So as he said, we conserve these habitats. Yes, of course, they're important for frogs, they're important for reptiles, but ultimately, we are saving ourselves. It did indicate that the degradation of habitats is correlated with our GDP. The more wetlands we lose, the more forests we lose, the less rich we are as individuals. So we are basically doing this for ourselves, not necessarily those beautiful little things that we showed one of the last slides. So it is us. And if this continues, with the climate change now on the blocks, we can never be sure what the world is going to be in the future. So thank you very much once again. Okay, so we have two small presentations and one main presentation, and we didn't allow any questions in the middle of the presentation. So I will allow open discussion from where we started up to now. And it doesn't have to be a question, it can be a comment, it can be a contribution to the discussion. Okay, we have two, that microphone is performed very well, but let's see how to do it. Any question or comment? Yes, and those keep watch on the screen if our participants mind. So let me start with Stephen.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for that presentation. It's really enlightening, and it has a lot of information us. The picture is global, it's well known, but also national. I did my research in double rice scheme, which is a rice scheme, but then it was under oral district. But right now, I think it's under oral district. So I was looking at the impact of wetland disturbance on the diversity and abundance of amphibians. My name was. So what I discovered is exactly what he has presented. Exactly what he has presented. Maybe someone will say, oh, the comparison of the two wetlands to the G and another level really separated by distance, but at least to me, it was in a distance of not more than, it was in a radius of about 5 kilometers where I did my research. So I was looking at the rice scheme, the farmers, their plot. Then I was looking at the grass, the seasonal wetlands, really grass, wetlands, open grasslands. And then I was also looking at painting species. So you can see the difference of about 17 species. So the degradation, of course, value with all those that cannot. Those I discovered in wetland farms, or wetland gardens. We are mainly those wetlands that can adopt easily. Like Cadena municipaliensis, tree frogs, Hyperoides voices, and so many other tree frogs. So some of those can easily adopt. But there were others which cannot adopt to such changing habitat. So those are the ones that we are being lost. Species like Pyrrhona galamensis, species like Pyrrhona albolabris, those were main dead. Galamensis was in the grassland, while albolabris was in the pure wetlands setting. So more and more wetlands are being lost. I was in the field when I saw this message. Actually, it is Professor Sal Chua who told me about it. I didn't see the message also because connected to this work, but later on I saw the message. I can do this. So, but when you look at what is going on, because I'm doing some work in Harvard, looking at the wetlands, wetlands of Australia, those are in Harvard University. I think one is in Harvard District. Then two in Plumamo, one is called looking at wetland, and another one in now which is that one is Rwanda District. These are white wetlands, but already the trend is being seen. Where we sample in areas where the intense wetland conditions the number of species are low. Where we sampling in areas where the wetlands are deep, the number of species are high. So really the presentation is true. We are going to lose the number of amphibian species. Whose forms we don't know as of now. But talk about, as I said, I was the pioneer, but the others who are coming up, I can see those are working on, Stephen Sewampa, Dent, Lucy is there. Not seen one of them, is Leo, Monslaka. We are with them in that work. And they are pursuing their masters. Thank you, that's what I can add. But agriculture is the main focus. I don't know what we as a country will be doing about it. Because in Kabale, Irish program farming is not with us. We continue with the when I went to Finland, was working on there, they are being taken up by the farmers. extending the food, so creating space for the animals. But in all these times, people saw that first of restoring. So it's a jigsaw puzzle. I don't know what we can do as a country about it, because we also fighting for survival. Poverty eradication, these are some of them, similar supporting government programs. But anyway, that's what we have.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen, for the comments. Okay, so thank you very much, and we're happy to hear that you are still doing some work down southwest. I do come from cover the Rwanda area. So when you say that potatoes are extending into the wetlands, we don't have any wetlands left there, and no wetlands anymore. Maybe the lowlands. Thank you. Any comment? There was about a time. Okay, so let's take like 3 comments and then we can answer them. So, myself, the microphone, another one.
Actually, so my many years ago, I also teach conservation science. So I am glad. Yeah. I'm just making comments and doing one of the first one was it's a combination. Clearly told us the forest cover is being lost, and probably weekend I was getting some more. But the trend which is happening is that there is official list of forest areas. This is not the tropical forest, it's the savanna forest. But what has happened is one of the study, there is definitely the landscapes. What was looking at the forest is given to the prominent person who some requires the lilies. One of the plants there is plantation forest. So what are we going to do about this specific fact? I know we are educated on forest restoration as a family, but also as a law. But the friend does not actually speak to that. When I have a license, I can plant there. That does not bring back what was there. So what do we do about this? Just unfortunately, I have in mind. Then the other topic also goes to my yesterday, the head of state was there. One of the problems is that actually the constitution about the open stuff like that. And now we are here talking about herbs. You don't easily translate those words. And the professor said we have a catastrophe. But for me, I think we also have attitude catastrophe. People think these are just reflecting them. And think, apart from these forums that we are preaching, I would say the converted way. What plans do we have to help those change the attitude and also change? So we have principles that are really strict. Then change those that like go astray. So I am happy to become a big very bad to more. Because of the catastrophe. Then one tell you. I was quite intrigued when Professor said lost 8 species they will be cheated. First they go. But I'm also interested no. The 8 species also occur in the cheated. The ones that we lost. The day people live in local here, probably will see now they are lost. I'll be interested to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's take a few more comments and evidence.
My name is Maurice Lagaba. I'm a physics student here in this department. But previously, I worked on my research Australia but I'm going to be sarcastic, so please bear with me. My question is, you look at the that the question is, the narrative is we want money, we want development, we want GDP to go up. But when we want to meet the middle income status, that's the main direction. Now, you guys here, or what I have had useful to about, is you want to have snakes, you want to conserve frogs and billions, you don't want people to farm because they are destroying the habitat. You want fat snakes and starving kids. That's the end of the circus, right? But the question really is, how do we present this information as policy makers so that we take the right action? I know Japan is one of the most highly forested countries in the world and also one of the highest in terms of GDP. So what lesson do we get from here and what should be the messaging about? Thank you. Proper messaging.
Thank you very much. So,
Good afternoon. My name is Tambia Kren. Being conservation biologist. I have 2 questions. My first question is, you talked about some species maybe reoccurring, even after, for instance, the forest recovers. So I was asking if capturing of the species and then does that benefit in any way? Because you have to know slash and burn, which is done for agriculture, but then forests could naturally come back to life and so would that be possible? Yeah, benefit. And then my second question is so does that mean, because you're talking about how, for instance, Equatorial is a big deal for Uganda, so we imagine if we lost most of biodiversity. So my question is, does that mean the existence of maybe an alternative or a better or stronger economy generator, does that permit us to neglect this problem? Thank you.
okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Nisha, for organizing this. So my concern is about the prevailing pressures that exist for people to survive. Because we can all agree that encroachment on natural resources, forests, swamps, they always exist. So maybe if Professor and the team here can help us to generate ideas, maybe if we can use indicators like technology, because if you find that people will keep unloading trees, for example, in Madeira, and you can't deploy men to watch the forest day and night. So maybe, I don't know if the satellites can people to use or any kind of technology to preserve such natural resources. Then the second one is we saw how devastating the destruction of the natural resources is irreversible. Because if we see that 8 species were lost, so one can imagine what can we do to restore that. And then even when you restore the habitat, it may not go back to its original state. So that's kind of a hard situation to imagine. But I would think that if we started doing the actual work, maybe what time can we wait to see positive results coming back because nowadays you are getting a lot of news about excessive weather conditions. The hurricanes, snow like they've never got before. Our dry seasons are longer than they've ever been, so it's getting worse. And if we decided to start to act now, I think it can help us to save the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I think your neighbor must be please. Yes? Okay, so the two last ones on that side for this one.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mabila Loisias. I'm a student at Kampala International University. Along with my colleagues, I'm very glad to be part of this conference. Mine is not talking about a lot, but I want to thank the program. I really appreciate it being on conserving our environment. As an environmental student and a conservationist, I really appreciate this program. And through the ED, Nature Uganda, I request that the next conference would happen at our university. I really appreciate this program and would like it to be at our university so that my people can also benefit from it. Thank you.
It is your place. So, and my question is, we are talking of conservation, and I'm a conservationist as well. But I feel the way we are trained in our different fields is one of the factors that limit conservation to become like a reality. Because as an environmentalist, I will be trained on conserving the environment. The conservation biologist will be trained on how to keep the ecosystems intact. And then someone maybe who is studying agriculture, he will be taught or trained in maybe coming up with innovative solutions, ensure that we can meet the food demands, and that will involve the use of these pesticides and which we know they deteriorate the environment. So my question is, how do we ensure for the integration of all those different fields so that we can actually achieve one common goal? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I hope my colleagues have been taking the notes.
I'm Major Richard. I want to comment that your findings are very important. Share them with the NFA, because what I noticed that over the weekend, the protest was an area of stewards. When if you had done a good work where they opened the boundaries of their forest, and when they went there, part of the forest had been closed. Settlements, schools, and everything. And now there were instructions that no, we are here as human beings, the environment is there to benefit us, not in the reverse way. So they want to gazette a certain portion that it goes off. So since you are real conservation sitting up, able to back up, then if there's a new executive director to really justify what they have done. But I've seen, I was on television where they said, no, let us do all this. Speeding up the process that we didn't say this because somebody is interested in the votes. That these Christians don't vote. So it's good data that also you may have to share. And even the Natural Resources Committee, because that's where you go to, that you have real background. Because they are now on a program of conserving wetlands, let the forest also conserve. not just here in Central. Entire, they are across the country. So that is it.
Good. Thank you. We are all conservationists, by the way. There is no such a thing as he's a conservationist. Because for you, you are a medical doctor, you're not a conservation. We are in this together. Not only us who studied the biology.
Thank you very much. My name is Professor Daniel. I am a student biology, but I'm working in Mukono as a senior entomologist at my district. Around Kampala, we have a program under the World Bank called the Greater Kampala Metropolitan Area Development Program. And it is going to cause development in a number of districts, about 3 districts, and 9 and 6 municipalities. So one of the districts benefiting is Mukono. And in the operations before these projects start, because they're going to build roads and other things, markets and so on, they are emphasizing the issue of conservation of wetlands, the forests, and then other developments can take place. The community has also begun realizing that we need these things after seeing the effect of not having rain and the temperatures which are going high in the area. The people there have condemned the NFA already. That when they gazette areas have forest, they are planting eucalyptus, which supports very few of the organisms that we are talking about, the biodiversity. And in line with the tree planting, the people of Pata and the natural resources officer who is in charge of bringing the trees to try and conserve the environment and improve it. That we don't want to see anything like eucalyptus bring us the natural tourism. That is now the trend. And we are going to have another. But the people are getting sun, they want natural trees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We should take some of those people to visit the area because sometimes communities inform the others better than us. So sometimes these exchanges can be very useful. You had that, didn't you?
I was just thinking it was a little bit different, trying to make the idea that rather than the deforestation causing the low GDP, maybe it was the low GDP that was forcing people to degrade. So to switch it the other way around, and then there's maybe an answer that if the government continues rural electrification, less people need charcoal. If they increase some electricity, if they improve crop production, then they don't have to keep destroying new areas. But of course, it's very important that the old areas are well protected and all the central reserves. So it is important that the pristine areas are protected. But I was just thinking it's a little bit, catastrophe and disaster. And for all these young people, it's quite nice to have some hope that maybe as GDP increases, with oil perhaps, with tourism, then perhaps that's a solution.
Okay, we started it. What you did? I think you did with that. Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Let's see whether we can go through this very quickly. There are a few comments on the Okay, Desire, you have to amend that? Okay, we're going to hear. So anyway, let's go through the comments now. One, I started with the yours, which is related to yours and another person. NFL. Allocating forest reserves for plantations. I will not speak as NFL. My own as a. So one, in the policy, the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act, it provided for NFA to work with local communities in what we call collaborative forest management. And in that process, the policy allowed that NFA would allocate 5% of the forest reserve to the community so that they can grow trees to mitigate the excessive over-exploitation. So the idea is that if they can grow their own wood, then they will not go into the main forest of collect firewood. In some areas it has been successful, in some areas it has been abused. So somebody is allocated 1 hectare, but after 2 years, he's operating 10 or 15. Of course, you may ask to where is monitoring, who is doing what. That's a different question. But the policy allowed 5% of communities to plant their own. In some places, it has been successful. We are working in Kaswaki Tome, it is just on the buffer for Queensland National Park. It is like 60% successful. In some areas, it has been just about. So that's the first part. The second part is that we have got over 500 forest reserves, central forest. Okay? Now, the original, the people who designed the large forest estate, they designed it in such a way that there will be natural forests. Okay? There will be natural forests, Madura type, Kasorian type, Green type, national park. But there will also be some forest reserves that will be planted in order to provide food to the country, because we need wood. So if you travel like on Mubende Road, you see a lot of pine plantations. They're actually in the forest reserve estate. But they were allowed to plant in order to provide wood to the country. I'm not getting a statement for that. In Uganda Wildlife Authority, they have rangers. There are people with gardens who go around monitoring the national parks. But we still hear a lot of encroachment at the national parks. In NFA, they don't have the same capacity. For them, they use what they call forest guards. Yeah, patrolmen. Yes, patrolmen. And we find we are working in Ishua Forest Reserve. I think you know where it is, somewhere towards Kisoro. It is 30,000 hectare forest airport for patrolmen. They have the sticks. That's what they patrol. No, please go see where the problem is. So capacity is also another issue in some of these areas. So I think as we look forward, we need to think about how we can manage this. Can comprehensive forest management (CFM) be an option? I came from Nepal about a week ago, and for them, what they have done is that they have allocated these forests to community. So for them, we call it participatory forest management. And the forests that are managed by communities are in much better shape than those that are managed by the central government. So there may be some lessons to learn from different countries. Okay? The last one, my comment is about cockroaches. But the cockroaches, but also other things. About 15 years ago, we had a campaign to save one of the forests called Magera Forest. Somebody mentioned Magera. Later you remember that campaign. During the campaign, because they had allocated part of it, 7,800 hectares for a sugarcane plant. And we said no, and we joined by quite many groups, and we all said no. But our big man in the hat was quite emphatic that he had to give away that because he thought it was actually supporting GDP, increasing GDP, increasing employment, bringing down investment, the tune of $300 million. And at one point we give them an opportunity to meet him. So we went with our reports. Yeah? The reports by the university with the frogs, endemic frog, endemic butterflies, endemic I don't know what plants, and so many species diversity. Of course, we gave to him. Mr. President, he thinks it's really important. But so many butterflies, so many things. And you know, the pass, send him how it looks. If he doesn't understand what you're talking about. And then he said, you mean I should lose $370 million of investment because of butterflies? And then he completed, turned it around and made it so simplistic that we're talking about just these butterflies, but not talking about the ecosystem that we are talking about. But he taught us a lesson, went back, we agreed, we are going to meet again and give you more information. And that's when we conducted an economic evaluation. Thank you very much. We conducted economic evaluation because we needed to compare. Does 370 million offset the loss of frogs? My friend there was talking about lose frog or lose butterfly and things like that. But when we calculated the ecosystem services, now more than just butterflies, more than the frogs, okay? Dr. Moini, if you remember him, a known environmental economist, the one who did that. And he came up with over $500 million of ecosystem services that were being provided by the forest. So now this new report went back to the gentleman who said, the president will have come up with now new information. He said, what is it? You want to bring investment of $370 million, but actually the forest is providing $570 million of ecosystem services. So which one do you want to lose? 500 million or 370 million? And he doesn't always like the fit. So he said, okay, I've got your report. I'm going to do my own analysis. I'll call you back and we'll compare notes. That was 20. He has not called us. Unfortunately, the forest is still there. So maybe they may have understood some of these arguments that we are having. But the point I wanted to make is, with the decision makers, especially politicians, you need a dollar mark on these ecosystems before they can understand. I think we need to do it. The metropolitan plan, all this development is ahead of us who are doing research. Is when they propose that doing this and then start coming up and say, no, before we get the information. I think we need to get ahead, the researchers, attention. We need to get ahead of the problem so that we don't run behind. Because sometimes it's too late. Yeah, sometimes it's too late. Okay? So, I will stop there. I will allow the thanks. You had a few comments, including your student.
I would be very big desire on the board is actually the gentleman is not the lady. The guy is the same. Yeah, next, there will be on for all pathologists to train to come and listen. Professor Kyle indicated most of the questions had very good answers for them. I will answer one or two. How to do Luigi and compare Navigable with the two. The two are related to the basin. If you are in a home, on one side is the way you expect the numbers to be the same, whether it's in or out. So then Victoria Basin have generally threshold, geocode. So you would imagine if we had a whole Rubiki, the minimum would be plus or minus one species. The simple comparison is better too. Rubiki, the minus is obvious because they are in the same basket.
Yes, exactly. This totally correct, obviously. And you have to consider that in general, in Africa, inside a same basin, practically the percentage of similarity in the species is extremely high. So the comparison is quite coming. But apart from this, I wanted to answer a couple of people because not remember all the questions. Remember his own comment, and another one was quite similar. So, how do we want to avoid people making culture and so on? Obviously, not at all. The point is, for me, what we can do. We can do the only thing that for me works is awareness. And awareness means teaching the people exactly the truth. For instance, let's talk about the most dangerous animals in the world, snakes. Okay? Snakes kill thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the world. Most of them are farmers. Personally, I work for a project for the Ivorian government, which I'm going in a couple of weeks, on a project on snake bites in cocoa plantations. Okay, so I won't deny that snakes are extremely dangerous. Here you have cobras, green mambas, black mambas, eating of vipers, gammon vipers. All these animals can easily kill a person. So they are for sure dangerous. In Australia, all the snake species are deadly. They are the only continent in which the great majority of the species are deadly. Okay? So the most important ecologist in Australia has done, and it has been published 1 year ago, a very interesting study. He calculated how many times a single snake eats rats. He calculated the density of snakes inside plantations and outside plantations in the various habitats. So he calculated how many rats are killed by snakes each year. And the number was huge. So basically, without snakes, the number of rats will be so much that the crops and the agricultural products will be destroyed. So the damages that the snake do, which is few people killed, I'm sorry, but is much less than the number of people that will suffer if the snakes are not there. So what is the point? The point is not to allow people to kill snakes. The point is to allow people how to avoid to be bitten by snakes. And this can happen only by awareness. For instance, in Ivory Coast, what we have done in Nigeria and Ivory Coast actually. First, we have been studying the snake behavior. So, when the snakes are more active, in which habitat, at which time of the day, and so on. Then we have studied how the people are active in the plantations. For instance, when the cocoa are harvested, when they are put under the sun to be dried, who is going to do this? Which were men, women, children, and so on. Then we modeled the two patterns to see how they overlap. And for instance, we found that despite the great majority of the farmers are men, women and children are beaten much more frequently because in Ivory Coast the men do the heavy work, they collect, they harvest the cocoa. What's the name? I don't remember the name of the pots, yes, and accumulate on the ground. But when they do this, snakes escape because they do a lot of noise. So they are almost never beaten. Then there are a lot of these things on the ground, and the dangerous snakes go inside under these materials to bask, for doing their own activities. And moving the pots is an activity that women and their children do. So basically, women and children experience about 80% of the bites. So what is the point? Is to teach them how to avoid it. It's so easy. They just go. If they just use a stick, moving the things before collection, and they will never be they will never be beaten. That's the point. So I think that we have to teach the people exactly this message. That these small animals, okay, the frogs don't have the same role as snakes, because obviously snakes eat rats that are more dangerous than other animals. But frogs are not dangerous, and this is one difference with snakes. Second, frogs eat a lot of mosquitoes. So, like lizards, they eat a lot of mosquitoes. In areas in which agama lizards are at low density in West Africa, there is more malaria. So, for instance, all this kind of ecosystem services made by amphibians, reptiles, I can say bats, I can say other species, should be always put into the message. Because I totally agree with you totally. That if we say because they are beautiful, because they are they are worth of living, many people will think exactly how to say that. Okay, but to be more rich is better than having a beautiful butterfly flying. So I totally agree with you that the message should be more oriented on practical things. Exactly as I said for the morning. That's what I'm saying. Then other question, honestly, I don't remember because there were so many.
There was another question about the balance between food production and conservation.
Okay. Sure. Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting, and more honestly, it's more important in other countries than in Uganda, because there are other countries, especially in West Africa, in which a lot of forest meat provide food, subsistence food for people. But even there, the things are changing, and this is a message that I want to give you. I coordinated the research with Nigerian, Ivorian, Burkina Faso, Togolese, and British universities, in which we were studying how the perception of people changed concerning bushmeat. Okay, consider that Nigeria was the first, probably the most intensive bushmeat consumer, the people in Nigeria, in the whole of West Africa. Till 2014, when, for the first time in the history, Ebola came in West Africa. Actually, Ebola never arrived in Nigeria because the Nigerian doctors were extraordinarily good. So they had just 14 cases with just one people died. So exactly the same percentage of survival that we had with a few cases in Italy or in the USA for people coming out from Africa. This to show how excellent they were. So they stopped the thing. But the government was absolutely excellent because they did a huge awareness campaign telling the people the risk of eating bushmeat. Well, since then, the consumption of bushmeat has completely collapsed. Now it's a little bit more, but it's completely collapsed compared to before Ebola. And the young generations, the young boys, the young girls of about 20, 25 years old, now don't eat bushmeat because they think it is not cool. They think it's something primitive. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they thought it was something cool. So the other things have changed completely, and the food production was not affected by this. The point is that I'm not an expert of how to techniques for food production, but for sure there are techniques for improving the amount of food using the same percent of territory. So it's out of my knowledge this, but for sure there are countries that show that a diet that was linked to forests, for instance, or wetlands, can be partially adapted with slight changes. So maybe with the production of fish in artificial ponds, this kind of things. So it's, in West Africa they use a lot the catfish because they grow very quickly, so they are extremely efficient than for food production. So that's not my background, but I'm sure that it's something that can be worked on.
Okay, right. And the last question, as far as talk about tours. Uganda, as we did indicate, the biggest foreign exchange island in Uganda is tours. Before COVID, we had hit 1.5 billion annually, and I think it's coming up gradually now. In the Alberta Rift, which you know, we discovered oil, and they are heavy machinery there digging and looking for oil. And the gentleman was asking, so should we, for example, stop oil production because we have found some endemic degradation or endemic frogs in the same region? What do you say? Because when we are presenting as science, that's what somebody say. This message, when we are presenting, it's like when one frog had died, it disappears. The one with document, which is not. And it was, I think it was quite a good question.
Yes, very good. Yes, and once more, my country, Nigeria, because I'm also Nigerian, is a good answer for this question because of the oil production there. Of course, you cannot stop the oil industry, but the oil industries exploit the environment. So the oil industry should pay for the environment. For instance, the research made by me and my team in Nigeria has been supported for 80% by Agip, which is the Italian oil company. We got something for just the environment, something like 22 million euro for studying the ecosystems of the Niger Delta. 22 million euro. Of course, 22 million euro is less than a small grain of what they collect from the environment. But for conservation biologists, it's a colossal. We can do huge things. And in fact, it's since 1996 that I have a team working every day in Nigeria because of the money of the oil companies. So we have to be conscious that oil companies are essential for the country, but are at the same time also very dangerous for the country. So they have to compensate what they are getting, giving a little part for the protection of the environment. In this way, we can have a sustainable way of doing it. And then now there are many ways in which oil companies can mitigate their effects. Even along the pipelines, there are techniques, a lot of techniques with which they can minimize their effect. And we have to oblige them to use everything that they can do to minimize their impact on the environment. Obviously, it's not me, it's not actually that they can do that. It's the responsibility of the Ministry of the Environment of the various countries to tell them, if you work in this way and you do everything to minimize the impact, then we can use a given area for extraction. Otherwise, no. It's something that has to be coordinated at more global level than just at the local level saying should we stop them. No, nobody has this. But for instance, if you have to select an area for new excavations, you have to do an assessment, because maybe there is another area in which your impact will be lesser. So everything optimized is really, there is a really big study of environmental impact assessments that can be done to minimize the effects of industry, and especially of high impact industries like these ones. But we can surely do it. I'm considered, when I finished my PhD, I worked for years before entering university for this oil company. So I was a biologist working for the oil company. So I'm not for sure the person that tell that industry is the devil and the butterfly is the angel that save us. No, not at all. I'm very realistic. But to be realistic doesn't mean to allow the industries to exploit everything, because for 20 years this will make some families to benefit. No, we have to obtain a sustainable economy, and we will never be 100% sustainable, but we are going through that direction. Simple.
Thank you very much. So we're meant to talk about frogs and reptiles, amphibians and reptiles. That's what the discussion was meant to be. But as you may notice, we are straying into the bigger stuff, the economy, the big industries, agriculture, forestry conservation. Because that's actually where the problem is not the frog. The problem is not the snake. The problem are these big things that we're talking about. So agriculture, industry, social, is fossil fuels, now big climate change. That's where the problem is. So the frogs and amphibians can only tell us that things are getting in the wrong direction. They are indicators of environmental quality. They are the ones that will tell us that, hey, come on guys, there is a problem here. Okay? Or destroy this area, you're going to lose your quality. That's what they're telling us. And my friend talked about whether we might want to use a frog and bringing in investment. Yes. The issue is, what will that frog tell you? And I'm going to end with two simple stories. There was somebody else like this comment? Quick comment, yes? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, but I will not talk about snakes. I know very much. But it is a very important point that and I wanted you to know. Okay.
I had an opportunity to discuss something similar about the and charcoal. Would there be a good if it's not right to do an economic analysis of the subsidy of electricity for cooking in the city without so that the savings that could come from the trees and forests which are there, silent, could pay for this. What kind of study was such a study profitable and do so that policy can be changed and responsible become
Right, the question of chicken and egg. Who have passed? Is it our poor community, lack of alternatives, lack of services, and driving them into destroying the environment? Or is it the quest for involvement that actually bringing down our list? Oh,
Yes, I forgot to respond. So, theoretically, I agree with you. So, theoretically, it's true that it's obvious that if a person is poor, he has to keep his family alive, and so he will exploit the environment more. But this is at the local scale. If you look at the data globally, this analysis doesn't stand. For instance, in Europe, let me say in Italy or in France, which are the countries that I know better, we have among the highest salaries in the world. Okay, but our environment is more destroyed than here. Is the deforestation is growing is higher than what happens in the average of the African regions. In spite we are much more rich. So the point is that of course if one is poor is needs to exploit. But the point is that this shouldn't be against the pristine areas. Once more, we have to make a study, for instance, at the country level, to let the people to even more exploit some areas that have maybe lower biodiversity relevance, and keeping them off from areas that are less biodiversity important. Ivory Coast, that is extremely advanced from this point of view, is doing exactly this. They have a huge forest, the Taif forest, which is the only primary huge forest in West Africa, in which they have armed people, policemen, that don't allow anybody to enter, and the poachers risk their life if they enter inside. But they have some other areas that are called forêt classée in French, which is something like classified forest. That means that are recognized as areas where people is allowed to do several activities. Other areas in which people are allowed to do even more activities in the boundaries of this forêt classée. So, what I think is important is that the various countries, the government of the various countries, will make a serious study to classify the world territory in terms of how much things people are allowed to do there. This will make the situation less chaotic. Because in this moment we have big problems. We have started with what happens in the border with South Sudan and Uganda, in which there is this huge turtle species that lives only in 50 kilometers of the White Nile, and there are plenty refugee camps. We published 2 months ago in Nature, which is the most important journal in the world, a warning exactly on this point, that obviously the millions of refugees will overfish, so will kill a lot of turtles, and they represent the highest threat for this extremely rare animal. If the things are done with a little bit more logic, you can create, for instance, areas where to put refugees in which the impact that they can have on the environment is lower. For instance, a little bit far down from rivers, from wetlands, from something like that.
there are ways. I'm not, of course, an environmental engineer, so I don't know everything. But for sure, there are systems to try to find an equilibrium between the people and the rural development and the forest conservation and so on. I think this is critical. Till we, scientists or conservation biologists or conservationists of NGO and so on, we continue to tell that the gorillas are beautiful and they are almost like us, and so the people should leave the gorillas and die for starvation, we'll never have any success. At the same time, if the people that want development we tell that we have to destroy everything for having development, they will have just famine. The Chinese under Mao Zedong tried this and they had the worst famine in the history of China because they destroyed everything. They destroyed the birds that were eating on some seeds that were invasive and so on, and all the crops were destroyed by the parasites, and China got the worst famine of the history of the country. So that's an extreme example, but it will happen when you don't try to be in equilibrium with the nature.
Thank you very much again, Prof. I'm sure we cannot answer fully 100% of your question. But again, the point is made. In Uganda, if you look at global level, even at regional level, the areas that are used by communities are not the ones presenting the worst. It is the big boys, the big guns. In Uganda here, the worst forest devastation happened when plantations was in Uganda. What happened to Karaka is no forest standing because of palm oil. You know what is happening with the sugar cane? Ugoma has lost about 8,000 square meters. That's where the problem is. And as we talk about local communities, as far as I remember when I go back home, the pieces of land that I cultivated is the same pieces of land that my mom is still cultivating now. They are not extended. If anything, they have lost some. They are not going to the forest. But who is actually degrading the farm, the wetlands in color? There are not many local communities. Of course, there are some growing a few potatoes, but the big part of the wetlands were lost with the cattle keepers, the ranchers. Those are the ones occupying the biggest wetlands in Kawaii. That's not to say that subsistence is not a problem. It is. But again, we need to look at the big picture. I wanted to end with two stories. I told you I was in Nepal about a week ago. In Asia, they had biggest biodiversity catastrophe about 10 years ago. They lost 95% of the vultures in that country. 95%. My colleague has just left. I just want to give the example that losing a frog is not as simple as losing a frog. It can be a big problem. So what was happening in Asia is that the vultures were lost because of a human accident. In Asia, they don't eat cows because cows are goats. They represent goats, so they don't eat cows. So, but they eat cow products, so they keep them. So, but the cows are treated for painkiller, because they stay in one place to grazing. So they are treated with painkillers. The most common painkiller they used was one called diclofenac. We can have it in humans as a painkiller. But diclofenac is actually poisonous to bats. So when cows get old or get too sick, they don't eat them. They take them what they call vulture restaurants. So there are some places where they just go and dump that, okay? And they were being eaten by the vultures. But the vultures are bats. So they got poisoned with diclofenac and they started dying until when they almost got wiped down. But that's the one story. The second story is because the vultures started dying, there was nobody to eat the cows. There were other scavengers that found an opportunity. And one of them were dogs. The number of dogs shot up. You know what happened? The number of rabies that came out from those countries also shot up. So just the killing of vultures, like a frog, simple thing, completely brought in a human health catastrophe. They are now trying to recover now. Diclofenac has been banned in most of the Asian countries. So that's one story about a small frog. Maybe a frog, look at it as a frog, but actually may be a cornerstone for a bigger. Thought that none of the stocks were dirty, and they were dirty like the town. They were spoiling people's cars who were parking the trees where they're nesting, and they were bringing all sorts of things. There were dogs and frogs and snakes to come and feed the young in the city. So they were messing up the city. So the town clerk said, I think we need to keep the kids. Poison. And I had studied about stocks in November in my university time. And I published a paper giving some statistics. So a man of the stock, about one time, it eats 1 to 2 kilograms of food every day. Okay? 1 to 2 kilograms of food every day. But what are the man of the stocks eating? That eating leftovers of meat, the dead cats, dead dogs, and dead things everywhere, which Kampala State Council is unable to collect. Okay? So we have got about 10,000, around 10,000, about 10,000 birds in the Kampala city and around the south. So if one bird eats 1 to 2 kilograms of food every day, the 10,000 birds are eating between 10 and 20 tons of food every day from Kampala. That is actually garbage. So I wrote an article and I said to the town clerk, these marble stocks are doing a fantastic job. First of all, they are collecting garbage, which we are failing to collect. Secondly, they are helping us to prevent disease. I made a statement which made him angry, and I now looking back, I should not have put it there. And I said, if Kampala City Council was as efficient as the marble stocks in cleaning the city, we would be having a better city than we have now. He was never happy with that statement. He called me to his office. I thought we were going to discuss about how to manage marble stocks. He told me some words which I'm not going to mention here. I don't want to repeat them. The point here is, when we are talking about biodiversity, we look at them as individual animals, but they are part of the bigger ecosystem. If you disturb that ecosystem, what comes out will be even worse than actually what we're talking about. So I think we can continue discussing these stories. First of all, give me a hand and we thank Professor Dr. First of all, for accepting to come. He's actually private. He writes, a scientist you can't just go and disappear in public. You'll find. He's some kind of his personal, visit. But when we knew that it was coming, we immediately, planned for this discussion. It has been fantastic. And as I said, it is frogs and snakes, but actually the bigger picture is the story. And Matthias, thank you very much for persisting to study things like frogs and snakes. And I'm happy that now you are training more than 20 students whom I hope the next couple of years we should be having more herpetologists to maybe discover more things in that area. And all of you, thank you very much for coming and participating in this discussion. KIU, you did request that you want us to come to your institution and have a similar discussion. I want to introduce you to our membership officer, Sandra. Maybe you know, you can link up and have a discussion. And try to convince her that it is important that you come and have a discussion. But here, I'll be happy to come and participate. So I think unless there is anything very, very, very urgent, I want to thank you very much. Thanks, Doctor. Thanks, Matthias. And thank you all for participating. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we should be letting you know where our November talks will be, so that we can prepare. So thank you very much and have a very nice day.